Welcome to Xagility. I'm your host, John Coleman.
Pia-Maria Thorén is the Inspiration Director at Green Bullet, an Agile consulting company in Stockholm, and is the founder of Agile People, a movement that started in Sweden in 2013. She specializes in Agile HR, Agile leadership and motivation. As a people management consultant for some of Sweden's largest international companies, she is a devoted change agent with an enterprise perspective who works to create organizations where people perform better, feel engaged, deliver customer value, and have fun all at the same time. Pia-Maria Thorén, welcome. How are you doing today? So, Pia-Maria, I loved your book, Agile People, a radical approach for HR and managers that leads to motivated employees. And you have a more recent book as well, which I'm really looking forward to getting into. But it's the Agile People book that I wanted to get into today. And but before we get into the book, would you mind, telling people a little bit more about yourself and how you got your journey to even writing this book in the first place, and why you ended up where you are?
Yes, I'd love to. Thank you, John. So I'm Pia-Maria Thorén. I'm from Sweden. Right now I'm sitting on the West Coast in Gothenburg. And my journey within the Agile space started in 2009, when we needed a way to work with our IT projects at a large manufacturing company here in Sweden. We were consultants and we were implementing talent management systems at the time. And that's what we were doing. A team of 8 consultants implementing large, huge talent management solutions, IT systems and processes all over the world. We were rolling out one size fits all standardized systems and processes. And while doing that, we realized that it was not all the time that we felt that we created an awful lot of customer value for our customers. And we ran into problems in the test department, actually, when we were testing these huge systems. So one of my colleagues said that maybe we should go to this Agile course and see if that's a way of working that could help us. And we did. We spent 4 days and that changed my life. After that, everything I did was kind of agile, in a way agile, because I felt very much at home in the values and the principles and the tools and methods that I learned about in that course. And I understood that there was a different way of being a project manager, being an IT project manager at the time. I was working mainly with IT configuration teams, but in this way, I didn't have a problem with my authority, with the control and command thing. It was a totally different way of running projects that I discovered. And I brought that with me, and we started applying it, actually, because we were working a lot with leaders and HR at the time. So we started to apply the principles and the methods, the frameworks on HR and leadership. And that's how it started. We saw that these principles and values and methods and ways of working could be applied to almost anything. So we say, why don't we apply it to HR and leaders? Because they seem to be struggling with this standardized way of working and the control and command mindset that they were using towards the employees and the policing attitude that HR had against the employees as well. So we started to run Agile HR training sessions, and we started up the Agile People conference in 2013. And then we started to create meetup groups across the world and started building a community around Agile People, which was the name, the working name of this non-profit organization. And I needed some training material for my Agile HR courses, and I didn't have anything because there weren't any books that had been written on the specific topic. So I say, okay, I need to write this book, because now I had been working with several companies implementing Agile HR and Agile performance management at Volvo and other large organizations. So I say, okay, I'm going to write about my experiences, and I'm going to write about my view around how you need to work with leadership and HR in the future of work. And after a long time, I finally got to write the book with a little help. In 2017, it was ready. And that's the book you see behind me here on my whiteboard.
Yeah,
so
thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. It's really, really good. And what I also noticed as well about the Agile People community, but I'm not sure if I misunderstood this, a lot of people who might have been formerly called in HR, did I misunderstand that? Like, human resources, are a lot of the people in your community, do they actually apply agility for HR departments, or is it more about you help HR departments to understand how the organization needs to become more agile?
It's both, yeah.
Both. Okay.
So it's HR within HR, the HR team. That's where you can use the tools and the methods and the principles. So a good way to start working with Agile HR is actually to do it within the team, the HR team. Start to work more cross-functionally, use visualization, start to work with Scrum, a Kanban board, etc. Start applying these tools and methods on yourself, so to speak. And then it's also about the deliverables that HR is then delivering to the organization, or rather together with the organization when we talk about Agile, because now it's not about HR delivering stuff to the organization anymore. It's together with the organization. They are involving employees and managers to give feedback on their work regularly in demo meetings. So how that could look like, it could look very different depending on the HR organization of the specific company, right? Sometimes you work with a central HR organization, and you have HR business partners out in the different parts, in the local parts, and the different geographical areas. And you also have maybe an HR service support department. And in that case, you could apply Agile principles and values to the central part as well as to the business partners. But the business partners work very local together with the managers and employees in that part of the company. So they would probably form a cross-functional team together with managers and employees in their local community, so to speak. Whereas on the central side, you would then do a cross-functional team with people from Comp and Ben, from the leadership department, from talent management department, from performance and recruitment, and all the different HR specialist areas that there are in a large organization. So it can look very different depending if it's a small or big or distributed, or how the organization looks like. The important thing is that you all the time work with the values and the principles and try to increase them inside the organization.
Pia-Maria, I often watched you doing kind of keynote speeches and so on YouTube, and really enjoyed your talks. And I noticed you were referring to the metaphor of a garden in terms of trying to foster an environment. And I often hear other people talking about, the metaphor of a house, like we're building a house or something, and we're putting in the foundations and all this kind of stuff. And often kind of what I think, it kind of makes me feel uncomfortable when we talk about building houses when we're growing agility, because it's kind of solid. It's a bit obvious. Maybe it's complicated, but it's not that complex. And it should build on top of a spring or something. And we tend to be kind of more controlled, try to be more protective in terms of what we're actually building. Whereas like the metaphor of a garden, I know metaphors can break down, but gardens tend to be more kind of complex sometimes, and even chaotic at times if you don't pay attention to it. It can really get quickly out of control, but also you can have more possibilities. If you really look after it, you can, if you keep it well watered, keep it well fed, you prune it at the right time, you try to foster growth, and bigger doesn't necessarily mean better either, right? So when you're talking about creating an environment for agility, what is it that we really, what is it do you think we need? What is the garden for you, I guess, and is that even the right metaphor to use?
Yes, I do think the gardener, and specifically maybe the gardener as a metaphor for agile leadership, because that's what I use the most. It's the gardener. It's about taking care of the plants. I mean, a garden needs to fulfill its purpose, right? And the purpose could be to be as beautiful as possible, or to grow fruits or vegetables or other things that you then constantly take care of and develop and make sure they feel good and that they grow well, etc. The plants, and every plant is different from every other plant. A carrot doesn't need the same care as an apple tree or a raspberry bush or whatever plants you have in your garden. And the gardener needs to have the knowledge about how to handle different plants, how to take care of different plants and their needs. What are their specific needs that would make this kind of plant grow really well and be beautiful and fulfill its purpose together with all the other plants in the garden, so that the whole garden then can fulfill its purpose. And the thing is that you can't really control a growth of a plant. You can give the right environment, but you can't really control it. You can't really command it to grow. You can't tell a flower to grow more or better or faster, or you can't yell at a plant and command it to grow. You can only create the right conditions for it to grow. And that's my point. As the leader, you cannot really control the people. You have to just give them the conditions so that they can grow and perform in your organization. So the conditions in the garden will then determine if we can fulfill the purpose. And if your plant doesn't grow, there is probably a reason. Either you are not a leader who understands the needs of this plant. Maybe it needs more sunshine. Maybe it needs to grow in the shadow. Maybe it needs more or less water or fertilizer or something. But you don't have the competence to understand the needs of this plant, and maybe it would grow better in another part of the garden, right? And so this is a competence that the gardener needs, that the leader needs to have competence about people, because otherwise it won't work. You cannot be a leader if you don't have competence about how people work, what makes people tick, and what makes people grow and perform and be happy. So that's the gardener metaphor that I usually talk about, because then people understand what is agile leadership. Okay, it's this. It's about taking care of the system first, but also understanding the needs of different people and making sure that every kind of plant can grow and flourish in the garden, or every kind of plant that we want, at least. There are also some plants that come up as weeds in our garden. They don't fit there, right? So we need to help them somewhere else.
So Pia-Maria, something I see quite a lot is organizations are imposing agility on people, and often people don't get a choice in terms of how they achieve that agility. Some kind of pill, so to speak, is just given out, and take this pill, you'll be fine. Maybe it doesn't suit them, and I'm just curious, how you deal with that, and what have your experiences been?
I mean, some people don't like the agile word. And it's perfectly understandable when leaders try to impose, as you say, agile onto them. What's crucial here is to understand that people are creatures that work from intrinsic motivation. So they will do nothing if they are not intrinsically motivated to move in a certain direction. And that's what I'm talking about when I talk about understanding people or knowing people on a deeper level. It's something that we don't talk that much about in Agile. Unfortunately, we are focusing maybe too much only on the team, when teams consist of people, and we need to know people deeply as well and understand what is it that makes this person tick. Okay, peer pressure can take care of some of it for us, right? You will do a lot for your teammates and your team members that you wouldn't do for yourself. So that can take care of some of it, but it won't take care of everything. If it's a lot against your own values, if you are, for example, a very independent, very powerful, very status-driven person, you don't have the agile values. Why should you then move in the direction of agile? If you prefer to work alone and you're forced into working in a team, that will not work. And it's about understanding this and about solving these problems that appear when independent people or very introvert people, which is actually very common among software developers, paradoxically enough. Very, very common. If we don't take that seriously and show that I understand that you want to work alone, okay, how can we solve this? Can you go ahead and work on this task, and then we will work on this, and then we meet and coordinate instead of co-create or collaborate, because there are levels of cooperation, right? So we have coordination, we have collaboration, we have co-creation, and these are stronger and stronger forms of how we work together as a team. So we need to first understand people, what they want, how they work, what they are motivated to do and not. And saying that one size fits all will never work, and that's anti-agile, right?
Okay.
One size fits all is like saying that there is a recipe, and agile is not a recipe for success. That's the core of agility, is that solutions need to be different for different teams and different people.
Yeah, and if that makes life more complicated for us, so what? I mean, if one team needs to use Kanban, another one uses Lean Startup, another team just based on the Agile principles, another person that just need to work on their own, that's fine. And even if we're desperately depending on them, And okay, when we're trying to synchronize, it gets a bit tricky, doesn't it? But that's why we help companies.
And then, managers, they get upset and they say, yeah, but we want to standardize solutions because then we save money, because standardization is like when we become more cost efficient. Yeah, but it's more complex than that. So we can't run towards simple solutions, because organizations are complex adaptive systems consisting of people who are also in themselves complex adaptive systems. So there is no such thing as one size fits all. That would be the same as saying as there is a best practice, which there is not anymore. There is no best practice, and only mediocre companies work with best practice today. The best companies, they understand that they need to do it in a unique way. They need to reinvent the wheel. They need to do it differently, because if they use best practice, they will never be better than their competitors, because they use best practice, right?
And just on that though, like we kind of touched on some people kind of being kind of highly driven, and some of these people might be star performers. Often we might call them star performers in the organization. Yeah. And what I see a lot of the time when an organization is new to agility, they're kind of almost adoring these star performers. And if we only had Pia-Maria on this team, then John's team will be okay. Tell me more about that. I'm curious about that.
Exactly, because the value is created, 95% of all the value is created in the system. It's in the relationships between the people. It's in that garden, in that system, in that culture, that value is created. It's not by specific high performers or stars in the organization. They can paradoxically enough instead move the organization in the opposite direction. They can make it more difficult for other people to perform, and labeling people in, for example, a 9-box grid, which is a very common practice among HR practitioners, is very hurtful for an organization, to say that you are a star performer, you are an average performer, you are a weak performer. 80% of all people will not be star performers when you do that exercise. And this is extremely damaging to the organization. You are being judged by somebody else who doesn't maybe even know what work you have been doing, or it's the people who are closest to you who knows the most what you have been performing and how you have been doing for the last period of time. And performance goes up and down. It's very different during the year, because you may be in a situation where you need to focus at home or on children or on your parents, and then for another period, you will perform brilliantly because you have time to be engaged at work, or you're doing some work that highly interests you. And this is the kind of roller coaster that we all go through, called life. And we need to take that into account when we work with the people, that they are in different situations in their lives, and they are moving in different directions, and they have different interests. And we can only do that by communication and coaching. And that's why we need the servant leadership, the coaching kind of leadership. And that's why HR and leaders need to go first. Always, they need to go first and show the way, show this kind of coaching, trusting servant leadership, and not work with compliance of processes and systems. There has been so much focus on HR processes and HR systems, because HR has been pressed to work with that from management more, because they've been criticized in the past that they are not living up to the expectations when it comes to, for example, process management. So they have abandoned their most important task, which is being there for the people, which is listening to the people, which is going to Gemba, which is being out there, understanding the needs of the people and the managers. That's their most important task, together with the leaders' most important task.
And as well as that, like maybe fixing problems as well that are beyond the influence of the teams. There's some issues that get escalated sometimes, and it can often be kind of disincentivizing, I guess, when senior leaders push the impediment back down to the team, saying you are empowered, you got the power to do this, but actually they really don't.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, and everybody knows it's not true.
Pia-Maria, I met a gentleman 3 years ago, and I was kind of sad that I only met him 3 years ago. His name is Dr. Lan Secretan. He's still one of these thought leaders, very active. I think he's 88 years of age, but he has no wrinkles on his forehead. He's been married for decades. He skis 4 times a week in the winter. He climbs mountains in the summer, and he says his secret to longevity in terms of his long-lived youth is he sees the best in people. So I thought, that's me finished then, but 'cause I can be a bit cynical sometimes. But he explained what he felt was the difference between motivation and inspiration, and he wasn't really talking about people being self-motivated, right? So self-motivation as well, but it's the expression that we say that we're going to motivate people, right? And so what he was saying was, motivation is where you're basically lighting a fire under somebody. Give them a bonus, or you encourage them to do something that basically they wouldn't have done of their own volition. Whereas he says inspiration is more kind of lighting the fire up inside people, and kind of really getting them going and so on. And so I loved the passage in your book about when you talked about motivation, and you kind of touched on that really people are motivated, and it's about how we avoid them getting demotivated and so on and so forth. But what really struck me in your book is you wrote quite a bit of text on the Rice motivation profile. And I'm really curious how you landed on that, and why that was so important to you.
The reason why I was looking for a good model or framework or method or whatever to understand people on a deeper level, and the Rice motivation profile proved to fulfill all my requirements on such a model, which is that I want them to be valid and reliable. I want the model to be based on solid research and data. I want it to be based on empirical research and data. Not that some scientist goes out or researcher goes out, professor goes out and says that, yes, I have this theory or hypothesis that I would like to prove, but instead collect a lot of data and then analyze and then draw conclusions from that data that they have collected. So this is all true with Rice motivation. And the other thing that I think is important with such a model and framework is that it's modern, that it's been tested on thousands of people, and also that there is this balance between difficulty to use and usability. So it can be a very complicated model that you really can't understand because you're not a psychologist, for example. Then naturally it goes away. I cannot use it because I'm not a psychologist. So you need to be able to use it although you're not a psychologist. So it's that balance of ease of use, but still being very serious and getting a lot of data and a lot of value out from it. So there's this delicate balance, right? So that's why I've been working a lot with the Rice motivation profile in the past. And I find it extremely useful, not just to understand certain people, specific people, but also to understand how people relate to each other and work together in teams, for example. So I usually do washing instructions, and that's a metaphor that I'm using. So washing instructions is something that you have in every piece of clothing, right? You have a small little thing saying, okay, I want to be washed this way, but not that way. I want to be ironed, not too hot. I shouldn't be washed in water, etc., etc. So it's the same with people. They have their own washing instructions. Do this, but don't do that with me. And everybody have that. So what you can do is this little exercise where you then put down on a flip chart. Each person gets a flip chart and they say, do this to me, but don't do this. You know, people get surprises every time you do that. You put it on the wall and then you go around, you have this vernissage in the room with the team, and you don't have to do a motivation profile or a Reese motivation profile to be able to do that, but it helps for understanding. But you can do it even if you just do this exercise together in a team. It will give you a lot of value, because you will understand things about people that you didn't understand before, and it will make people come closer and understand each other on a much deeper level, which will help in how when you work together later. The thing is that the more we know about each other and the deeper we know each other, the more we start to like each other. And when we like each other, we work better together. And when we work better together, we also produce better value together to our customers. So this is a very good effect from spending time together with the people that you work the closest with.
That really rings a bell with me. Thank you. I'm going to check that out. You also wrote in the book about learning, and you had this kind of rough ratio that you use as a rule of thumb. 70% of learning is kind of like on the job, like through experience, and maybe another 20% through like coaching, mentoring, and then maybe 10% classroom. And I can relate to that as well myself. But how did you get to that point where you felt that this was the right percentage?
It's an old kind of framework. I try to find out where it comes from, because it's being talked about in HR circles, and it's available in books, but I really couldn't find any source of it, and I don't think it's a scientific truth, but still I like it, because we learn all the time. I learn here when I sit and talk to you. I learn a lot of things. So we learn all the time on the job. And that's the biggest learning that we do all the time in organizations every day. And then we also learn a lot from each other when we communicate, when we work together, when we share things, when we collaborate on certain projects, etc. And then it's a little bit also in this more traditional form of training that we learn. Maybe 10% is learning from traditional classroom training or online training, let's say. But it's mostly when we interact and when we are asked to give input, and we take part in an active dialogue together with other people, that we learn the most. So, and it's an agile organization is the same as a learning organization. It's actually, you could put, they are synonyms, right? Agile and learning organization, it's the same thing. It's an organization who has this ability to shift and to continuously learn and improve and change depending on the needs in the external world. And that's what we have seen now with the pandemic, that we need to all the time adapt to reality and maybe change our ways of thinking and working, maybe even change the way we deliver products and change what products we deliver and what services we do. And when we are in this situation, I would recommend to use the collective intelligence of all the people in the organization, instead of saying that, yeah, now we don't know what we are going to do, like they do, management. They take the power, they say, stop, we now freeze everything, and we don't say anything. And people are kind of left alone out there, not knowing what to do, instead of using that power, that collective intelligence that they have in all the people. What shall we then do now? Because they don't have the answers. Management never have the answers, but they want to seem like they have the answers. But yeah.
That strikes a chord with me as well. I think the companies who did really well during this pandemic crisis so far have been the ones that didn't waste the crisis. There's those old adage, never waste a crisis.
Never waste a good crisis, we say.
Yeah.
There's a lot you can do during this.
And so one of the things that kind of concerns me a little bit about society is that the tenure of CEOs tends to be getting shorter and shorter. And so, we talked earlier about gardening and, fostering a lovely garden, but the CEO coming in might not have that time horizon where they're even thinking about the garden. They might be thinking about the patio, do you know what I mean, metaphorically. And you do talk in the book about leadership maturity as well, and you've got various levels that you go through. What do you see as the kind of the challenges at the moment with, CEOs and such short tenures and getting shorter, but also the kind of the competing need, if we do want to have a lovely garden, for our leaders to kind of go on some kind of a journey of thinking where their level of consciousness basically goes up so that we can adapt as an organization.
Yeah,
what are your thoughts on that?
I think you have, as an employee, you have the power to move to an organization where there is a longer time, where you see a longer horizon in a way, and that is not this short-term thinking, or we are going to squeeze out as much profit as possible in the shortest possible time. And it's your choice. Where do you work? Where do you want to work? And if people don't accept these terms, these companies will have a problem to recruit talent, right? And to recruit people. And only the people who will accept to work under these conditions will actually stay in those organizations and work for these organizations. They will not. And the people who want to have different conditions, they will move and leave that kind of company, I think. So the power is not really with the leaders, it's with the people. And it's, yeah, I believe that there will be a big shift in how companies need to think to be able to attract good people in the future. They will be left with the people who would tolerate such thinking and such behaviors from leaders.
So Pia-Maria, one of the things that really struck me in the book as well is that you differentiate agile leaders and agile managers. And what I understood was agile leaders kind of almost like exec function type leaders, and then agile managers, people who are basically running the business, the stuff that kind of keeps the lights on, so to speak. And we know, of course, that Google tried to get rid of a lot of their managers, and then they brought them back. And so saying that managers aren't needed could be a bit naive at times. But one of the things that we noticed in the book is that you talk a lot about Management 3.0. I'm a personal fan of delegation poker, for example, for Management 3.0. And I guess my question is, what was it that struck you about Management 3.0? That what is it about Management 3.0 that really resonates with you?
Well, I've been working with Management 3.0 since 2013, and it was my first meeting with agile management. So it was a great school, and I'm a huge fan of Jürgen Apollo. And I also had him in my conferences many times, and we are friends. And I really appreciate the way he makes the topic of management understandable and fun and playful. And this is something that I have tried also to do in my own courses and my own trainings, to make it kind of playful and fun instead of something boring, administrative, etc. And I really like the way he sees management. So yeah, Management 3.0 is something that is close to my heart, I would say.
Yeah, if nothing else, I would imagine 3.0, I can delegation poker is a real gold nugget. Because when people say you are empowered, it's almost like a command and control word, isn't it? I'm giving you power. You know?
Exactly.
So like we find out we're empowered or we're not empowered. And what I really like about delegation poker is you find out how much power you really have. So yeah, I love that about that.
And it gives a lot of psychological safety when you know,
yeah,
when you have it on the wall, maybe on a delegation board. You're really, this is my area, this is my key decision area where I can make the decisions, right?
Yeah.
So it gives a feeling of, yes, I know now where my boundaries are, and that's
exactly
crucial.
Yeah.
I know what can I make decisions about and not.
So something else that really struck me in the book, as a less practitioner, I'm a big fan of self-designing teams. And you mentioned that fairly deeply into the book. And I'm just curious, how often have you seen self-designing teams, where teams basically decide themselves, people decide themselves what team they go on to, kind of thing?
You mean self-selection?
Self-selection, yeah.
I think it's quite common in Sweden, especially in the tech industry, that consultancy firms and tech organizations and, the modern organizations, they usually work like that. They let people select themselves how they develop and what they work on and how they will go about doing their jobs. Less common probably in more in other cultures, and probably also in larger international organizations, hierarchical, top-down driven organizations. It's not so common because you're more labeled and you are put in a box with a label on it. I am this, I am working in this department, this function, and I don't mix with the others. But there I have a recipe that is quite powerful, and that's boundary spanning and the buddy system that you can work with to break up these silos between different functions and instead work in teams that are more cross-functional sometimes, so that you have still your functional team. Let's say you have HR, you have R&D, you have manufacturing, you have finance and legal, etc. And then you make these buddy teams that consist of one of each of these different departments. And except for your usual functional team, you also have a place in a buddy team. And that's a formal organization as well, but another kind of organization. So you're part of two different teams. And you meet in your buddy team regularly, and you discuss topics that would concern the whole organization. Like maybe strategic topics, or how do we deal with COVID, or how do we work with leadership, or different things. You could have a buddy who gives you feedback on your work, and you can collect information. You can go back to your functional team, and if everybody has this buddy team that they go out to and then bring information back from that team, it's a very efficient way of learning, creating a learning organization like that, through boundary spanning boundaries between areas, functions, knowledge areas. It could be external even, also to the organization, to work like this.
Thank you. It's a really nice idea, because in some frameworks they use like guardians, other places they have communities, but I like this kind of buddy team idea because it's a bit more, it's like formalized informality, and it's like a home that you can go to.
Exactly.
Because often we throw out the baby with the bathwater sometimes, and we go from what I call layer of cake teams to slice of cake teams, and we kind of lose the goodness that we had. There are some benefits to the way we were organized before.
Yes.
Not all bad, yeah.
And this is not threatening to management either, because it's just, the purpose here is to learn from each other, from other parts of the organization. So then it doesn't, there has been conflicts between HR and IT traditionally because they don't understand each other. But if I have a buddy in IT, I can go and talk to them, and I can ask them about, how do you work with agile teams, for example? What can we learn from you in HR? It becomes more natural if you have somebody that you know in each of these different departments. So it's a very good thing that any organization can do tomorrow, really.
And later in the book as well, I noticed you talking about employee engagement, and you refer to the Gallup 12 questions that, you know, the kind of gold standard really for checking how engaged people are, like, do you have a friend at work and stuff like that. And then you talked about the level of disengagement, if you like, and there was one expression that really struck me. It was transactional employees. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? And if someone is a transactional employee, how, do they have a place in this agile world, actually?
Yes, I think employees are a product of the system that they work in. And if the system they work in treats them like that, they will become transactional employees. A transactional employee will only create as much value for their organization as they think they get in return to their salary. If they think they are underpaid, they will then adjust the engagement that they put into the organization by saying, okay, no, I don't work extra. I don't put in my whole self because I think I'm underpaid. Then that's the transactional part, that we see the relationship with the organization as, I work for you, you pay me for the work I do, but I will not invest my
energy,
my soul, my energy, and my engagement in the organization as I could have done if I was feeling invested in the cause, or with the people, or with my leader, or, you know, I love the work we do here, and feel that I've seen that kind of engagement in small video clips with, for example, the Morning Star organization in the US, the tomato factory. And then when they speak, you hear that they are really, you know, it's like the company is theirs, but it's not. But they feel like that, and they really take responsibility and ownership for their part of the work. And that's what you want to achieve with people. You want them to feel like, yes, you know, this is, I'm really doing meaningful work here. And I kind of bring that feeling back home with me when I go home in the afternoon, that, yes, I'm doing I'm meaningful, I'm valuable, my work matters, you know, this feeling. And I'm doing what I do best every day. This is from Gallup. And I have the tools I need to do my work right. And I get praise, and I feel that my colleagues are committed to doing quality work, and all these things. That's what people says all over the world is what drives them, and what makes them happy, and what makes them engaged.
It kind of brings us back to the gardening again, doesn't it? It's kind of basically telling us that we need to be good gardeners to create the environment where people do feel inspired. They do feel the passion, the focus, and the energy, because humans are naturally agile anyway.
Yeah, you know, somebody seems to care about me at work.
Yeah.
Somebody seems to care about what I say. They are listening to what I say, and they take it seriously. You know, basic psychological needs that people have. Understanding that is the key to engagement and success.
Pia-Maria, I was really struck by the way you closed out the book. The very last 3 pages of your book, you referred to Dr. Leandro Herrero. I have to say I'm a huge fan of Dr. Leandro Herrero, and he's got this blog called Daily Thoughts. And in one of those blog posts, he wrote a poem, I think it's called If. And I'm going to read the poem to you. And I'd like to get your comments after I read it in terms of, you know, why did you pick this poem, and what was it that struck you to finish your book with Leandro Herrero's poem? So I'll start. If instead of a company you had and led a community, if instead of employees you had internal social activists, If instead of people in the payroll, colleagues behaved as volunteers. If instead of a mission, you had a cause. If instead of a culture, you had a social movement. If instead of leaders, you had brokers. If instead of teams and a teamocracy, you had peer-to-peer networks with widespread teaming up. If instead of a budget to spend, you had a budget to invest. If instead of employee engagement, you had an employee loving it here. If instead of a business plan to execute, you had a business campaign to run. If instead of annual employment engagement surveys, you had a continuous sampling of opinions. If instead of asking why people left, you asked them why they're still here. If instead of values on the wall, you had non-negotiable behaviors on the ground. If your organizational structure could self-reconfigure as needed without noise or hassle. If the words change management were alien or retired, or one of them redundant. If you had a long queue of people waiting to join in. If you had human language as opposed to management dialect. If work-life balance was an oxymoron, you loved your work and your non-work. If you could walk into a very special place at 9 a.m. every day and looking forward to it on a Monday morning. If you could feel that what you personally do has a real visible impact, then yours is the earth and everything that's in it. And, which is more, you'll be a new leader, my son, he says, but it could have been my daughter, I guess.
Yes.
Beautiful poem.
It is. I love it. And isn't this what work should be about? It's really is the glass half full or half empty, right? It's the same kind of, we talk about work-life balance, but it's really not about work-life balance. It's only about life balance. We only have one life and we need to make the most of our lives. And we spend so much time at work every day, at least 8 hours a day. And we need to take care of ourselves. We need to be happy at work. We need to be happy when we go home. We can't be somebody else at work. We can't put on a mask when we park our cars in the parking lot outside of the office. Then we go in and we work all day. Then we get out, put ourselves in the car, take off the mask and go home. We need to be ourselves at work and we need to create real value. And that's so important since we just have this life, right? So providing that kind of environment for our people, I think that's the most important thing that leaders can do today at work. And the leaders that understand that and the leaders that create this environment, this garden, where they take care of their employees instead of trying to use the people in the best way to get more money out of their companies or whatever, they are the winners, I think, in the future of work. I'm really convinced.
Pia-Maria Thorén, absolute pleasure to have you here on Xagility. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, John.
If you would like your voice message to be featured on a future podcast episode, please leave a voice message at anchor.fm/xagility/message. That's anchor.fm/xagility/message. Thank you.
you.